Switch that off. So I am hoping that this is all working. Yes, it looks like it might be. Excellent. I am here. Right, guys. This is my speaker slot for Speaker Week. I'm Mark Terrell. I'm the reluctant leader. I am a leadership coach and mentor. And I'm here tonight to talk about finding your why. Now, this is particularly important to me because in my previous life, I joined a family retail business, and I joined that business straight from school. I was persuaded by my dad that he needed my help within that business. Hi, David. And so I joined that business, and it was very successful. But I stayed in it for 30 years, and the final 10 or so years were quite stressful because ultimately I was doing not enough of the things that motivate me and too much of things that didn't motivate me. And so consequently, I work a lot with my clients to make sure that what I'm helping them with is something that motivates them. And I think motivation is very much in line with the Simon Sinek golden circle setup, where if you know why you do something, then you are more likely to stick at it and get more from it. And also people sort of get you and really sort of connect to what you do. And going back to my previous business, I fell out of love with that because I fell out of I forgot to stay focused on what it is that was important to me. And the things that were important to me were innovation, doing something worthwhile, and having some freedom, where a lot of those things were missing from my retail business. And it's something that I make sure that I maintain within my coaching business. So what am I going to be talking about today? I'm going to share some slides. There's not going to be too many of them, but it just helps me to let you see what I'm about and what the model I work with, which is, I think you'll find quite interesting. So let's just tidy up the screen a bit. That. Put me up there. You'll see me. Let's make me a bit bigger. I've already found that my slides are all in the wrong direction. Okay, so here we are with this. We don't need to start there. So finding your why. Before we get on to that, I just want to share with you a model that I work with my clients, and that is the four elements that we need to perform well. Now, I'm guessing that most people in this group are business owners, so you have decided on and you have control over the direction that you and the things that you do. So the direction is one of the elements, which is important. I hope this is sharing. I've got a feeling it's not. You're not seeing my screen, are you? I'm sharing. Share my screen. See if that works this time. Nope, it doesn't seem to be working. So unfortunately, that's not going to work. So I'm just going to have to talk around what I was going to show you. Unfortunately, I was checking this in another group, which I'm admin to, but obviously that's the difference. So I work with motivation a great deal, but it's only one of three elements that is important for anyone to perform at their best. And the first element I was talking to you about was the direction. So we all set our direction, and then from there we need to then decide how we do something. So that's where we, for those of you that use psychometrics, that's an important part of how we do things. Together with the skills and the knowledge that we've got to actually perform and deliver a service, whatever that might be. We're all coaches mainly in this group, I think. So whatever that is you're doing, then that will depend on the way you want to do it, depending on your behavioral style or your personality style, whichever. So that's the second element, the skills and knowledge that you need to deliver. The third element is motivation, which I mentioned earlier, and understanding where motivation fits in that three-step model. It's a triangle basically, with direction, skills, and motivation at each corner, and they all interact with one another. So it's not that one's more important than the other. It's the three elements that are really key, and understanding where they all fit in. So the three elements then, you could, rather than call them direction, skills, and motivation, you could rename them the what, how, and why, which is very similar to Simon Sinek's Golden Circle TED Talk, which is, I'm sure most of you would have seen. And if you haven't, I recommend you go and have a look at that. So understanding the what, how, and why. Once you know those three, you're aware of those three elements. The elements of that three-step process or triangle, motivation, is the one that most people forget or overlook because there hasn't been a way of actually identifying what it is, what actual motivation is to us. If you ask somebody what motivates them, they're more likely to say, "Oh, paying the mortgage off," or those sort of things. But what I talk about is actually what motivation is. So let's just talk, stop a moment just to talk about what motivation is. If you break the word down into the two elements, the motive to take action. So the way I talk about it is that the more motive you have, the more likely you are to take action, and vice versa. So if there's little motive, you're not going to take action. So that's what motivation is. And I think there's a lot of confusion between motivation and inspiration. From where I come from, I talk about motivation as all coming from within us. So you can't really get motivation from others. Yes, you can get some incentives from outside you that are the things that you're looking for. But ultimately, if it's money that drives you, then that's what drives you. People can't make you driven by money. That's the problem with when people are marketing to us. They've got to realize actually that there are several things that motivate us, and those key things are making a difference, freedom, money, obviously, security. So there's a combination of actually 9 elements that we're all motivated by, but the key is to know which ones are most important to us. So we delve into a bit more detail about this. If you think about, I'll drop a couple of things into the chat. Firstly, a little worksheet you can look at, and also the 9 elements that I work with motivation and motivational maps, which is the tool I use. So I'll drop that in after I've finished. But if you think about your skills and your knowledge, how skilled and knowledgeable you are, and give yourself a score out of 10, and also do the same with your motivation, a score out of 10, and don't think too much about those figures. If you multiply them together, you'll get a performance figure, and that could be anything from, I don't know, 40 up until hopefully something. If you're 9 and 9, then it's 81%. But the key thing to remember is that we can be as skilled and know our job inside and out, but if we're motivation to do the job and deliver and stick at it, then we are not ever going to perform very well. And that's where most people fall down, because they're not really tuned into what motivates them. So I've mentioned motivational maps. With motivational maps, we talk about the 9 motivations to work. And we group them into 3 groups of 3, the 3 relationship motivators, the 3 achievement motivators, and the 3 growth motivators. Now, at this stage, some of you that are familiar with the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you will see that there is a correlation with that model. It's not exact because it's also this motivational maps are also based on the Enneagram and Edgar Schein's career anchors, but you will probably see some correlation with Edgar Schein, sorry, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But we look at it slightly differently because of Maslow's, you talk about things being built on top of one another, but in this model, it's not necessarily something that you build upon. It's actually, we're all a mixture of all these 9 motivations, and they're all going on all the time. The key is to know which ones are most important to you now. What we do know is that later on, and as you progress, your growth motivations become more and more important as time goes by. So hopefully you're getting this. I'm just worried about there's nobody listening. We'll see in a minute. Anyway, the 9 motivations. So the 3 relationship motivators: the defender, the friend, and the star. So defender is security, friend is belonging, and star is recognition from others. The achievement motivators is the director, the builder, and the expert. The director is the motivation to have influence over others or manage and control others or things. The builder is the money and material satisfaction drive, and the expert is the mastery and specialization and knowledge drive. And then the 3 growth motivators: the creator, that's the innovation. So that's the drive for innovation and bring new things in. The spirit is the freedom thing, or freedom and autonomy. And last but not least, the searcher is the meaning and making a difference drive. So as I've said, we're all a combination of all these 9 things, but the important thing to know is which ones are driving you at the moment. And it's, some people quite find this quite difficult to do on a manual basis. So I'm going to give you a way of working it out. I'm going to drop in a worksheet that you can use to first of all do that little exercise I've just told you about with the skills and motivation, give you a score out of 10 for each, and then multiply to give you a percentage to see where you think you are. Then I've also on that sheet given you the 9 motivations. So what I'm just going to suggest you do before you think too much about it, think about the ones that are most important to you and put them in order. So I've put them in an order going from defender down to searcher on the sheet. Think about the one that is number 1 and think about one that's number 2 and work your way backwards and see which ones you think are most important to you. And then also after that, you can then give yourself a score out of 10, how you think those 9 motivations are being met. And then once you've done that, you can then think, well, is that relevant in my business? As actually, are those things being met in my business? And if they're not, then you need to start thinking about how you can probably make some adjustments. So let's just talk a little bit more about what these 9 motivations are. The friend motivation is about belonging, and that is seeking friendships and being fulfilled in relationships at work. The defender is about stability, security, and safety at work. And by those 3 words, you'll probably detect that defender motivator is about keeping things the same and not changing things. And then the final relationship motivator is the star. So that's the recognition thing. So I often talk about the star motivator as the marketing driver within us, especially if we are running our own businesses. Then it's important to have a drive to actually promote yourself, which it's often lacking, and one of the things that we look at quite soon when I'm coaching. Then we have the 3 achievement motivators: the builder, which is the drive for money and material satisfaction. the director, which is the drive for having influence over others and managing and being in control. And then you've got the expert, which is the drive to learn and be a specialist. Expert is one of my key drivers, and I've got to be wary of it, that I'm not constantly learning new stuff just for the sake of it, making sure that it's relevant to my business. And then you've got the growth motivations, the searcher, meaning and making a difference. I'm sure that's really big in this group, and is going to be a key thing that drives us forward, that we're making a difference. The creator, I guess, is also quite important with innovation, bringing new things in, and doing things your own way, which is very much a trait of the spirit motivator, doing things your way in your own time, so that you're not having to just go and deliver things in a particular way and you have no control over it, and you can do them in your own time. That's the key driver, I guess, as well in this group. So once we know where those 9 motivations are, we can then start looking at how they're being met within the realms of motivation, and how that fits in with the person that I'm coaching. And when you talk about motivations, it's obviously important to make sure that you are creating a business that actually will motivate you ultimately. So if you're creating a business that is not going to give you much freedom eventually, then, and your spirit, which tends to be quite strong later on in our careers, you might be actually creating something that actually is not going to motivate you in the long term. Also, what I've come across a lot is that we want to be specialists, but we tend to not stick to our guns on being a specialist. And when the money's on the table, we tend to go down a route which is more generalist. And I'm sure most of you in this group know that it's best to be a specialist in something. I've mentioned my specialism. I'm a leadership mentor and coach, and I talk about the reluctant leader. I talk about how most people get to a point in leadership that they don't really want to be there, that it's not something that really drives them, and so it becomes a problem, because they are that they're creating something that actually isn't going to be any good long term. And I'm very wary of the way I am developing my business, so that it makes sure that the key motivations that I know of are going to be met going forward in the long term, and not taking a short-term view. So my top motivations are the creator, which is so bringing new things in, being innovative. And some of you might know that I have a podcast, the Reluctant Leader podcast. That's one of the creative things I do. I also create online courses in my Reluctant Leader Academy. And so that's something I really enjoy, as well as the one-to-one work. I'm also a very strong searcher, so I want to feel that what I do is worthwhile. It's something that I think that I'm making a difference, and there's a lot of meaning in what I do. And incidentally, the searcher motivator is the most common motivator in all the motivation maps that ever been completed. And the searcher motivator is very important. We all want to feel that we're doing something worthwhile. And quite often when business owners are employing people, they lose sight of the fact that that's what people want. They want to feel that they're doing something that's worthwhile and making a difference. And one of the key, we talk a lot about reward strategies with motivation, and the key reward strategy for searcher is actually giving good quality feedback so that people actually feel they're making a difference. So I hope this is all making sense. Also, the thing to remember is that one of the problems I come across a lot is and I mentioned it with myself, was that is that we might focus on the things that motivate us and make sure those things are being met in our business. But what about the things that don't motivate us? How are they being met? How are they being met within the business as it is? And also the things that don't motivate us, how are we actually dealing with those things? I talked about the star motivator being around marketing. Most coaches don't like marketing. I listened to David's message into the group earlier about sales and marketing, and he's going to do some things around that. And yes, that is, a key factor I come across is that coaches are not focused enough on marketing and they're not focused enough on the money. And it's something that comes up a lot. So it's interesting that Dave is going to do something about that, I think, at the end of the Speaker Week. And also sometimes what I find is that people are torn in two different directions. They want things to stay the same, but they also want things to change. And that's what we call a conflict. And by highlighting that with a motivational map, it allows that conversation to happen. It allows people to be more aware of what's going on, and prevent them from getting stuck or just feeling that they're being tugged in two different directions at the same time and feeling really uncomfortable about that. So it's important. This information can really make a big difference, and that's why I wanted to talk about it. Finding your why. Most people know it's important, but actually they don't know quite how to identify what it is that actually drives them. So I've pretty much, I'm not sure, I've got a few more minutes to go. I'll see whether I can see any comments. Let's go into there, see the comments. David, yes. Mr. Senek, yes. And KOD, I hope I said that right. Hello to you. And Kay, if you could post a photo of your slides in the thread, I will. Oh, yes, I'll do that, Kay. And indeed, technology hasn't worked out. I did test this in another group, which I'm admin to, but it didn't quite work. So I'm not able to show those slides. But I will show some. Yes, I would share some stuff for you all to look at, especially the 9 motivations and the worksheet, and you'll see get more idea of what I'm on about, so that you can maybe do the exercise. And what I suggest you do, because it's quite tricky, Motivational Maps is an online diagnostic tool which I use, and if anybody's interested in finding out more about that, then please get in touch and I can tell you all about that, how that works. But without going down the route with doing the diagnostic online, if you look at the 9 motivations, if you think about the 9 motivations and then just if you get someone to do it with you or do it yourself, is to get 2 motivations and shout out one or the other and see which one's most important, and give that the one that wins a score of 1, and then work your way all the way through, and you'll see which ones come to the top. It's a crude way of doing what the diagnostic does, and it won't be quite so accurate, but it's a way of like thinking, well, actually, what things are important to me. And because there's always generally 1 or sometimes 2 motivations that come to the top, which are a surprise that we haven't really thought about. And also ones that are down the bottom. The ones I get big reactions to is when builder, which is the money drive, is the most important, the strongest. Yes, Kay, I think I'll share. I'll give you the slides to David. Well, hopefully David can upload them for someone to look at. So going back to the motivations, builder motivation, when it's the strongest, quite often is the one that people feel, a bit edgy about, and they say things like, "Oh, it's not all about the money," which I just say, look, it's not. I don't really need to know that. I'm sure it's not, but it's obviously at the moment it's a drive that you need to be aware of. And if it's not being met as well, then you need to do something about it. And what can you do on a short-term basis so it doesn't become a hygiene factor? And then on the reverse, the friend motivator, when that becomes or comes out as the lowest, then quite often they say, well, I am friendly. And well, I'll say yes. Well, yes, you are friendly. I know you well enough to say that you're friendly. But the thing is, you don't go to work to make friendships and belong. That's the key message. And in itself, it doesn't really mean a lot. But in context, is that causing you a problem? Can you think back to when you needed to be a bit more focused on belonging and maybe feeling that you are developing friendships or just connections within the business, and maybe you didn't have enough connection or focus on that, and did that affect you? I had someone with the star motivator not so long ago. She did a motivation, and Matt found out that our star motivator was very low, and when she found out what the star motivator was, she suddenly had a bit of a moment when she realized that a potential business partner that she was going to work with, she was clearly a high star and she's a low star. And what we talk about again is that when you get people that are the opposite to you, then quite often that can become a conflict, because you feel that there's a difference between you. And she realized that actually having someone that you work with which is opposite to you is actually a strength. And after that, she actually went back to the person and had a conversation and said, look, I realized I made a mistake. I said things that I were wrong. And from as far as I know, they're now working together again. So these things are really important. If you just bring them out into the open, then people can actually make decisions based on this information. And we know that, knowing what your why and knowing why you get out of bed in the morning is very important, especially when you're trying to build a business, especially when things are getting tough. If you've lost sight of why you do things, then it's easy to throw in the towel and think, oh, it's not worth it. But if you're always you always remember why you're doing what you're doing, making a difference, whatever it is, and I'm creating something to give me freedom, whatever those things are, and obviously being a bit more specific as well. Once you know and you're working towards that goal, you're more likely to stick at it. So I hope that was useful. I will, as I said, drop some things into the chat. Apologies for the technical difficulties, but hopefully you've got some value from this. And I'm looking forward to hear the rest of the speakers this week. Thank you, David, for organising this. And I will wish you well, and I will hopefully catch up with you all very soon.